Hey, Facebook, what is going on? What is going on? Whew. How was your day? How was your Friday? How was your week? How is your stay at home, virtual work, virtual learning? Whole lot going on these past few weeks. But I hope everyone is doing well. I'm back. So, we're just gonna do a little chatting. So if you or someone you know was adopted, this is the Facebook Live for them or for you, whoever it's for. So be sure to tag somebody, invite some friends. I'm trying to figure out how to invite some folks. And let me see here. So yeah, this is going to be kind of like a Q&A kind of thing. So, anybody that's interested and wants to talk about their experience or the experience that someone they know has had, then this definitely is the show for you. So most of you know who I am. I'm Suzanne Stroud, and I am the CEO and lead facilitator of Straight Up Communications. You can check my website out at Be Straight Up. That's BESTRAIGHTUP.com. Do facilitating, coaching, speaking, all those other good things. And adding to my list is currently a podcast. So my podcast, hey ma'am, my podcast is about life. It's called The Life Diet 365, and it's really about having a conversation on life perspectives. So like the perspective on life rather. So most of the podcasts up until episode 6, I think it was, they usually run between 9 to 13 minutes because I'm not much of a chatter on podcasts. But now that I'm doing the adoption series, it's going to be a couple of episodes. Those episodes run about 15 to 20 minutes. So if you don't have a long ride, you can kind of split it up, one on the ride in, one on the ride home. And so I'm just coming on today to kind of talk about a few of the things that I've shared in the episodes thus far. So that way, when you do listen to them, or if you've already listened to them, I can kind of give you some expound a little bit. So if you've actually watched the episodes and you have a question, put your question in the chat here and I will answer. So last week's episode, I kind of talked about not being alone, because I think that I know from my experience, I remember when I was told that I was adopted, I felt like I was the only one. I felt that I had kind of been plucked from this garden, and now I had to kind of figure out where I needed to grow and how I needed to grow and who I was and who I was connected to, who was my family, just all those different questions. And so if you found out as late as I didn't find out until I was 26. And if you found out as late as I did, you're kind of like, oh my God, my life has kind of begun and I've begun doing other things. I was already married and had my children. And so when I was told, it was such a shock to me. It was such a shock to me when I found out. So it was like, wow. Only thing I was just really concerned, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest. Like the first question I had when my mom told me that I was, thank you for your support. That's my brother, my birth mother's oldest son. And I love him. And I think one of the first things I thought of, like the first question that came to my mind when she told me I was adopted, and not that I was promiscuous or anything, because I just wasn't. My mother was the kind of person, she told you that you got VD from kissing. So I was like, I guess I ain't kissing nobody. But I was like, oh my God, I wonder if I dated my brother. That was the first thought that went through my mind. I was like, oh, that would be just so horrible. Just please don't let that be the case. Then I just kind of went on with, hey there, thanks for watching. Then I just kind of went from the space of like, so who am I? Who am I connected to? Who's my family? Like just who? And so if you or someone has been adopted, you will understand that there are some questions. Hey, Marty, happy belated. you will understand, or maybe you won't understand. There are questions that they have, there's feelings that they have, and there's emotions that they had. And I think I shared in my first episode, You're Not Alone, that I wasn't even upset with my birth mother when I found out that I was adopted. I was upset with my adoptive parents because they waited so long to tell us, and I was upset about that. So I wasn't even upset, with my birth mom, because I think even at my age and really not understanding all that, I just figured that there was a good reason. And now I wanted to know my health history. So last week's episode, I gave some data about adoptions. This is why I say that we're not alone, because in the 1960s, like between 1945 and 1973, 4 million parents put their kids up for adoption. 4 million parents in the United States placed children up for adoption, with 2 million happening. I know what part you're laughing at too. With 2 million happening during the 1960s. So there's a lot of 60s babies out there. So that means that if the 2 million were adopted, that means that there's a lot of us out there. And then I know for me, and I don't know how many other people felt, like there was a shame that came with that. I'm doing two things at one time. There was a shame that came with that, because I'm like, oh my God, these aren't my parents. Like, where's my mother? Where's my father? Do I have sisters and brothers who are my cousins? And it's so funny because as a kid, like, I think if you're a kid and you find this out younger, you're like, oh God, I got two families. Like, now I can go to this one and I get to choose if I like this sister or brother and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, oh my God, do I have brothers? Do I have sisters? So there's like so many questions. And so when I looked at this data, I was like, wow, so there's 2 million of us out there. So the first thing that I want to kind of help people to kind of get past, especially if you're an adoptee, meaning you were the one that was placed for adoption, is that you're not alone. And then the second thing that you have to realize is that there had to be a good reason. It's not a reason for us to understand, because we won't ever really understand a decision that a birth mother has to make. But it was just something in me that I was like, this was the best decision. So like, that's really what you have to sit in. It was the best decision, at the time. And, that you have to look at the era and where we were all born. It was a different era than what we're growing up in now. And so it was a lot tougher, for women. And so we just kind of have to get out of ourselves and say, hey, you know what? They made the best decision. And so what I did was I kind of found something in Cosmopolitan where they interviewed like a couple of women and they asked them questions. And so it kind of helps you to understand, what the thinking is. And all of them pretty much kind of thought the same thing. So when you look at, at the time of the interview, they were, between the ages of 24 and 33. But when they placed their children up for adoption, they were between the ages of 16 and 21. Wait a minute. They were between the ages of 16 and 21. And so when you think about, a 16-year-old and in the mindset of a 21-year-old, they're different. And so you have to, it's always about, taking an inward look. What were you thinking at age 16? What were you doing at age 16? Because I know at age 16, as y'all just saw, as I posted the other day, I probably was thinking about dropping out of high school according to how my transcript looked, because that thing was horrible. I mean, I just think they gave me a F minus. I don't even know how you get an F minus. How do you just flunk and flunk more? Because that's what an F minus is. You flunk and you flunk more. And so at 16, I was, trying to play softball. I'm hanging out with my friends, riding bikes, and like you're not even thinking about taking care of another person. Like, you're just barely trying to figure out who you are. And then when you have a 21-year-old, their life is just beginning on a different level. You're of age and you might be going to college, or you might be getting out of college. You're doing all. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. My brother says you are a strong woman and he admires me for that. Like, that thing is a nut. If y'all ever catch that one. And we are so much alike, I swear. And so, there's just a different mindset. And so then, the other thing that they asked them about, I'm just going to go through a couple because you can check it out on the podcast, And then they had their reasons, and they asked them the question, why did they feel that adoption was the best option? And so just to kind of share a couple, and one thing that you kind of have to keep in mind, whether you've been adopted or not, hey there, is that our kids, our children make decisions based on their surroundings, their environment. So the decisions that our kids make are based on how they see you as a mom, or how they see you as a dad, or how they see their household, and people who kind of came in, who they interacted with. So our kids make decisions based off of the experiences they have with the adults in their life. Let's just put it that way. So when they asked, why do you feel adoption was the best option? One person said her sister, my sisters all had children very young, and she watched her sisters struggle to raise them. And then her mother ended up taking, some of the kids, to raise them, which is not fair to the mother. And then another woman said, I was raised in a single parent home for 6 years, and they didn't want that for their child. So when you think about a woman that has had to put a child up for adoption, you have to think about the circumstances, why they felt that they had to make the decision. And so when I'm releasing part 2 this weekend, and then part 3, I'm going to talk about, my experience with, searching for my birth mother and finding her, and finding out the circumstances of my adoption, which, was pretty much what I thought. It wasn't, I didn't have anything negative or any ill feelings about her. And so then they asked, what was the other thing? There's something else I want to share with you guys. I kind of got off task. And, so then they talked about what were the biggest fears. And so they all pretty much shared the same thing. Was, one of the things that they all had in common was, would the child forgive them? Would they be angry, or would they forgive themselves? And you have to look at it on both sides of the spectrum, that whatever the situation was, why you were placed up for adoption, you have to know that it was tough for that person. Like, you have to know that it was tough for them. We can all get in our feelings and say, well, why me, and this is that and the other. Like, those were the circumstances. And so they were afraid that, about regret, and they were concerned about regret, and if the kids would hate them, and how their families would treat them, and it's just like a whole gamut of emotions that happens. And so that's why it's so important not to judge. And so I'm finding, even in my walk, when I tell people that I'm adopted, and I share my story with them, like, I have a really crazy story. So like when I start talking in the podcast, I'm talking about how crazy it was when I talked to my birth mother's youngest son on the phone for the first time, because I already spoke to my older brother, who is her oldest son, because he's not the oldest, I'm the oldest. But when I talked to him, I had already talked to him. But then when I talked to our younger brother, I'm on the phone with him, and I say to him, I said, gosh, I swear, if I didn't know any better, I would swear that I'm talking to my brother that I grew up with. And he said, oh yeah, and just to know his voice, he just kind of had that swag about him. My brother Jay, rest his soul. His birthday was last Friday. And he said, well, who's your brother? And I told him what his name was, and then I told him what everybody called him. And he said, oh my God. He said, man, that dude has been my barber for like years. When my brother would come from Philly to visit his family in Connecticut, he would hook up with my brother. So my brother that I live with was cutting my birth mother's youngest son's hair. My grandmother, and see, these are some snippets I'm giving you. My grandmother, my father's mother, lived next door to my mother's best friend, and we were always over there. My father was married to my best friend's aunt, and I hung out with his sons, my brothers, a couple of times. So like, it was just so crazy. It was so crazy. So you kind of have to, realize that, that there are reasons why. So here's something else I want to share. What else was it? And so here's a question that I think that everybody asks: is the birth mother and the adoptee. You know, the question was, do you still? It said, did you still think about the child after you put them up for adoption? And they were like, yes, every day. Let me see this. Shawanda says, thank you for sharing this information. I've always wanted to adopt, and this is interesting. Can't wait to check out the podcast. Thank you so much, Shawanda. Appreciate that. Because I think that when I have conversations with people and I start telling them my story, people have like these different emotions. And being on the adoptee side, like having been adopted and knowing, you know, the circumstances, and then knowing the home that I grew up in, I'm like grateful for the decision. And so, you know, when these women were asked, and when I asked my birth mom when I met her, you know, I asked her, well, I didn't even think I have to ask her. I think she told me. She said, I thought about you all the time. And she said, most pointedly, I thought about you on your birthday. So there are struggles that like a birth mother has, because whatever is going on in her life after the adoption, there's a period of sorrow, I would assume, that she experiences on that child's birthday, because now she's thinking about the decision that she made, and she's probably wondering if she's still asking herself if she made the right decision. But then she quickly convinces herself, yes, I did. And then they go on to say, you know what, well, I hope that their life is better. I hope that they're in a great family. And those are all the things that she said for all of my birthdays. And so because I didn't know about her, I didn't have to ask that question. But they said that they thought about the child every day. And so here's something that I put together. Where is it? Where I said that they have these questions that they ask. And I said that there are probably questions that were asked, and they're legitimate questions. So the mother, we'll focus on the mother, because I think it's very important. I think that this is so pointed that it was very strategic. I did this on Mother's Day, because I know that there's someone out there that is experiencing this, and especially as an adoptee, and you're having a tough time with this. And I just really want to say, you know, cut your birth mother, cut your birth father some slack. And I met my birth father too, y'all, but that's a whole nother story. That's another series. But cut her some slack, because you don't know how tough it was for her, and don't know how tough it has been. And when we start showing love and forgiveness, it frees them as well. You know, it really frees them up as well. And so there are questions that a mother asks. They say, am I making the right choice? Did I make the right choice? You know, a lot of birth mothers, they sit and they wonder, and they go through turmoil, and some go through depression because they're wondering if they made the right choice. And then it says, will my child be placed in a loving home? Excuse me, I don't know what's going on. And so, will my child be placed in a loving home? And that is like the biggest concern, because the reason why, you know, she's making this decision is because she feels that by putting you with someone else, you stand a better chance. That's what it's all about. And you can always play devil's advocate. Well, no, you should have kept me, and it would have worked out. And, you know, then what if it didn't? Then you turn around and say, well, why didn't you just give me away? But here's the thing. Here's the one thing that I said. After I found out I was adopted, in this episode that's dropping, I talk about, you know, how I felt about my adopted mother after she told me. The one thing I remember saying, I will never forget this. I remember saying, I am so grateful that she gave me up for adoption, because she could have aborted me. And that is so real. And that's what I want people who were adopted to kind of feel, that, like, sit in that thought for a moment. Like, they could have aborted me, but instead this person chose to give me life. They did two things. They chose to give you life, and they chose to give you a chance. And that's why it's so important that you make the best decisions, and you do great things in life, because you were given life and you were given a chance. So that's the difference between us and people who were born with their natural parents, because they were given life. There was a twofold for us. And so I'm grateful for that. I rest in that every Mother's Day. Like every Mother's Day is very heavy for me, because I always think about my birth mother, and how the fact that because of her, I have life, and because of her, I was able to give life. I was able to become a mother because my mother made a decision to bring me into this world, allow me to live. So there's a whole lot that goes with that. And there's a whole lot that you could be appreciative of, and a whole lot to be grateful for. And just like Shawanda says, she's been thinking about adopting. Like, I think that that's the best thing that anybody could do. Now, I'm gonna tell y'all know I'm always very honest. I'm so grateful for somebody adopting me, but I ain't trying to adopt nobody. Like, I'm just not there. I will support somebody who's making that decision, but I'm just not there. Just like when I met my husband, I had a child, but I would never date a man who had a child, because I ain't trying to deal with no crazy woman. And there were some crazy women out there, but that ain't what this is about. I'm not Benita Betrayal. I ain't here to tell you about that. So every Mother's Day is always so weighty for me, but not weighty in a bad way, but it's weighty because there's a whole nother level of gratitude that I experience, because it was because of her that someone gets to send me a Mother's Day card. Like, sit in that for a minute. Like, I'm just being honest. You know me for a long time, Shawanda. Like, no, I'm just being honest. Ain't no need in being fake, because I could try to be a martyr and say, oh my God, I was adopted, so I want to give the same experience, to another child, because I barely had patience for the ones that I gave birth to. So ain't no need in somebody else ending up in the system again. And then the mother asks, will they forgive me? And can I forgive myself? And so I don't know who's ever going to watch these videos or who's ever going to listen to my podcast, but I really want the mothers, if they have never forgiven themselves, I want you to forgive yourself. Like, you made the best decision based off of your circumstances and what you thought was right at the time. And then if you're the adoptee, you need to forgive yourself for feeling aught with your birth mother, first of all, and then just forgive her. Just say, you know what, I forgive you. That was the best decision that you could make, and just leave it at that. Then the adoptee, people like me, ask these kinds of questions. Why didn't they want me? And then I said in the first episode, I said, I did say that, but then I really twisted that around. I didn't say, why didn't they want me? I said, what were the circumstances that they couldn't keep me? Because I just had that wherewithal to process all of this. And maybe because I was 26 when I found out, maybe it would have been different if I was 16 when my parents told me. Oh my God, if they had told me when I was 16 that I was adopted, I probably would have acted a pure D fool. It shouldn't be private. I'll see, but if not, I'll definitely make sure that it's shareable, Renee. I said, but what were the circumstances that where they couldn't keep me? Because that's what it really came down to. There were circumstances that prevented them from being able to keep me. And just so, edit privacy. I just made it public, Renee, so it should be different. And just so you know, from what I'm told, my birth parents wanted to keep me. But this is why I have to say the circumstances. My mother was one of 6 siblings, and my father was going off to the military. And when I was born, I think my grandmother on his side was going in her 60s. So here I have 2 families that just weren't in a position to take on another responsibility. Like, they just couldn't. So that's why I say, why didn't they want me? I'm like, no, what were the circumstances that prevented them from keeping me? And I absolutely understand that. And then you ask the question, was I a mistake? I've heard some people that's been adopted that said to me, well, was I a mistake? Is that why they gave me up for an adoption, up for adoption? Look, and I had to tell people, and I'm quick to say this, there are people who are married who are in relationships and committed relationships, and they have oops. So it has nothing to do with birth parent, adoptive parent, like, kill all that noise. Like, it has nothing to do with that. And then it depends on the age. If a child, because I was fortunate, I was very fortunate that I was adopted less than 30 days after I was born, I think. And I had my original birthday. And so here I'm going to share this, and I haven't put this in the podcast yet, so you guys are getting a tip. So I found out what my name was, what my mother named me at birth, and I had to like laugh. I really cracked up because the name that she gave me, that she told me that she was going to give me, was the club name I used, Michelle. Ain't that funny? That's what I'm talking about, that subconscious stuff. Like, you got to pay attention to that. And I talked about in the video that's coming up. So then the other thing I talk about, does my mom ever think about me? That's what the adoptee asked. Does my mom, ever think about me? And so there are questions that are asked on both sides. So for people who are in this situation, and there's a lot of us, because if 2 million were adopted in the 60s, there's a lot of us. So I want you to understand, as the adoptee, you are not alone. We are not alone. And the fact that someone adopts you, there's love on both spectrums, because the birth mother loved you enough to bring you into this world. Like, she loved you enough to sacrifice her life and her body for 9 months when she could have made another decision. And then another family loved you enough to choose you to adopt. So that's why adoption is so important. And I do believe in it. I'm so grateful that I got to speak at an adoption conference 2 years ago. But when kids are adopted, after they've been with their parents and maybe they're taken from the home and put in the system, they ask if they did something wrong, and does their parent ever think about them? And there's that connection. There's something about, a woman carrying, a child in her womb. There is a connection. So there is something that, there's a feeling, there's those unctions that aren't explainable. And that's what I talk about in this episode that's coming up. Like, I was feeling something, I just couldn't put my finger on it. So, I close by saying, there are a lot of reasons why, a woman would choose to place a child up for adoption, but it doesn't matter how you or I feel. We just have to understand their situation. And I chose this at Mother's Day because I just think it's so important, as mothers and even as children, that we understand that everything was for a reason. There was a reason. And I may not ever really fully understand every bit of it. I've gotten a lot of tidbits, and I understand a lot. And the crazy thing about it is, like, that's why I talk about connection, because my birth mother and I, we are so much alike. Like, we are so much alike. I had her on speakerphone one day at work and let my friends hear me ask her a question that I knew she was going to go ham on. And they looked at me and it was like, oh my God, you guys are so much alike. That's why I tell people, it's DNA, how I am, and, how forthright and transparent. I just say what I think and feel, and I don't hold, like, it's in my DNA. It's not something that I evolved to be. And then when I watch my brother on his Facebook Lives, my mother was marching in protests, like getting arrested and that kind of stuff. She's a biker chick. Like, she rode motorcycles, Matter of fact, it's coming up on a year that she was just in a motorcycle accident in Virginia. Like, she's in her 60s. She was in a motorcycle accident. So, it all comes back full circle. And it's about understanding, a woman's choice. And I'm grateful for the choice that was made to give me life. And this is not one of those pro-life type things, because I don't get into those type of debates. I just don't. But I'm grateful. And like I said, I chose to do this, around Mother's Day, because I know that like I said, there's 2 million were adopted in the 60s. So there's a lot of us. There's a lot of people that kind of have struggled around this. And I wanted to, break my podcasts, what I talk about in my podcast, to kind of share this. So like I said, the podcasts are a little bit long. They're like 20 minutes. I try to keep them at 20 minutes. So you can do it on your ride or sitting in traffic. Pretty soon you'll be sitting in traffic, so you'll have time. Everybody get back out there in them streets. And so just wanted to just kind of, share that. And then, I have some things coming up in my podcast that's coming up this week. But, does anybody have any questions? I know Shawanda, talked about, thank you, Marcel. I appreciate that. You have questions for me. Like, it doesn't even have to be anything related to your situation. You may have a question that someone that has asked that question, or someone that's having a tough time. And I'm actually building another platform to kind of be able to kind of talk about this, because I don't think this should be something that people should be ashamed of, that they should be hidden. And especially like the birth mothers. The birth mothers need to feel free. They need to have a form of liberty, and they shouldn't have to live in shame. And I was very fortunate. I'm gonna tell y'all, I was like quadruple blessed, because my birth mother and my birth father, their families accepted me. Like, my older brother, who's on here right now, well, not my older brother, he's her older, he's the oldest son. He always wondered why didn't he have a sister? And his mom knew that he had a sister. And so there's a liberty and a freedom that really needs to be given to birth mothers, because I think that they're so unfairly left to survive in the shadows of a decision that they made, 20, 30, 40, and in my case, 53 years ago. That's not fair. Man, that's not fair. They should be able to come out and say, I gave a child up for adoption, and if they have not met or come together, there should be a way for them to come together, because I just couldn't imagine living like that. I just couldn't imagine living like that and not being able to be free, because thank you so much. That's why I say in the beginning of my podcast, why did my mom wait so long to tell me I was adopted? And that's what I talk about in this episode, when she told me, now let me just tell y'all this. I have a brother and a sister that I grew up with, and we were all adopted from 3 different families. Now, I'm not gonna be able to tell all this in the podcast, but my sister, like I just said about my family being close by, my sister's mother lived like in the next street behind us. And so she said that she never told us because she never felt that we weren't hers. So she never felt the need to tell us that we were adopted. But immediately after telling us, she made sure she let us know that she was okay with us searching for our parents. And do I think there's a certain age that children should be told? I was asked that question before, and I just think it's just based off of your family dynamic. I'm meeting a lot of people who were in open adoptions, and I think that those work out very well. But it just depends on like the maturity of the child and the family dynamic. And I think it should be done early, so that they can kind of grow into knowing that, and being able to have conversation about it instead of being shocked like I was. And Shawanda says, what about not telling the children at all? Is that healthy? I think that if my mother had never told us, and she went to her grave, oh, wait a minute, let me tell y'all this. I didn't tell you this. For all those years that we didn't know we were adopted, our entire family knew that we were adopted. Like aunts, uncles, grandparents, friends, they all knew, but nobody ever said anything. So I think that if my mother passed away going on 3 years this year, if my mother passed away, and my adopted mother, and somebody told me, or it came out that we were adopted, and I never got a chance to ask her any questions, I would be very angry. And because the possibility of getting some resolve on that end is forever closed, it can take a person into this whole spin of depression and regret. And so I think that they should know. And Asha McDonald said, how old were you when you found out? I was 26, and I was married, and I had 2 kids. And it was like the toughest thing, because I'm just like, oh my God. And because I've always been health conscious. Like, I've always wanted to make sure, I've never had any major things going on with my health. Always been healthy. Can say I have no cancer. I don't have this. I don't have that. Diabetes. Blah blah yada yada. And then when I found out I was adopted, I'm like, oh my God, I can't say that anymore, So then the one thing I was able to find out was that colon cancer ran in my family. And so my mother told me that her mom had passed away from colon cancer, and it was one of those things where it skipped generations. And so then that possibility of that falling came on my generation, which would mean it fell on me. But I don't practice positivity now, y'all. I was practicing it back then because I was like, ain't no way in the world I'm gonna have no colon cancer. But I'm gonna tell you right now, I love going to get a colonoscopy, but you can call me crazy on that one. But yeah, so I was 26, and it was crazy because I had moved out of state. So now I had to try to do this search from out of state. And y'all, let me tell you, internet was not like it is now. I'm gonna tell you what we had when I found out I was adopted. We had MySpace. That should have never happened. MySpace should have never occurred. But so that means that I didn't have Google. I didn't have that. So all of these things were done through like adoption forums, and you heard all of these horrible stories that people had. And, you know, that was something that I was afraid of. And so that's what I believe, going back to Shawanda's question, I think that the child should know, but at what age, it's up to you. But my mother's reason was she never felt that we weren't hers. And so here's something else I'll share with y'all. So on my 30th birthday, I made a plan to go to Connecticut. Yeah, MySpace. I wanted my birth mother to have a picture of all of her children. And so for my 30th birthday, it was twofold. I went to Philly, and there's a whole nother story behind that. Yeah, that somebody told me that my mother was in Philly. Like, I actually went to a psychic, and she told me mother. I'm like, why would she be in Philly? Why would anybody go to Philly? But anyway, so my 30th birthday, I went to Philadelphia because I wanted to do a picture of all of her kids, and we were able to do that. But my younger brother Jay, he was a Muslim. He's a Muslim, and he practiced, you know, being a Muslim, and so I understood it and I respected that. And so she has a photo with me, my brother, and our younger sister. And then the other thing I wanted to do was, from Philly, we went to Connecticut, and I wanted my birth mother to meet my adopted mother. And I'm gonna get to your statement in a minute, Renee. And my birth mother and my adopted mother met on my 30th birthday. Like, that was crazy. And I remember my birth mother, Regina. She has a name. I need to quit saying birth mother. Regina, saying to my mother, "Thank you for doing such a great job." She appreciated what she did. So it was just such a moment with those two, which was like, it was nuts. It was so nuts. And Renee said she had a close friend who was adopted, and she found out by mistake and was highly pissed and said her adopted mom was sneaky. See, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you just don't want to find out. And I don't understand the gangster stuff. My parents weren't gangster. You know, my father was a minister. He was a pastor. So that explains a lot about me, because the PKs are crazy. But I just can't believe that nobody ever said anything. Like, nobody. It was never... Because it was like we were theirs. Like, my mother birthed us, and nobody ever said anything for all those years. But if I found out after my mother had passed away, I think I would be like your friend Renee. I would be pissed too, because I don't think that it's fair. Because there's such an emptiness. Because like I said, and I say in the episode that's going to be released this weekend, it was a hollow feeling that I was like, oh my God. So my life just changed. My life just changed because I'm like, there's a whole nother family out there. And like I said, I'm fortunate and blessed that both my mother and my father, now I know where I get my temper from. I get my directness and no nonsensical sentiment and everything from my mother. But my father has a temper, and I couldn't understand why I was so angry. Like, I'm gonna tell y'all, I got mad at somebody. I was in the 5th grade. I got mad at a boy because he tried to take a turn at bat, and I knew it was my turn, and I took the bat and hit him upside the head, an aluminum bat. I tried to take bleach and throw it in somebody's eyes. I tried to run somebody over. Like, I was like, where's all this anger coming from? I didn't see this growing up. My parents, I didn't have that in my home. So that's why it's so important that you pay attention to how you are, you know, instead of saying, this is how I am. No, like, I had to say, oh my God, hey, there's my friend I grew up with. I had to say, hey, why am I so angry? Like, this is just freaking nuts. And as I started learning more about my mother and I started learning more about my father, I started to see the parallels of who I had become at that point. And then it was up to me. See, didn't I told y'all a little while in the video that my father was with a friend of mine's aunt, and her niece is right here on this live, and she said, yes, your father was definitely, he had a temper. Yes, he did. And Tracy, she knows, she saw some of the crazy stuff. I'm like, so you have to look at that parallel, then you have to make a decision. Just because this is how, you feel that you are, do you always have to be that way? Like, did I always have to have such a temper? Did I always have to be so devious? Because I was very devious. I was very devious. Like, it was about getting back, and it didn't even matter. So I had to make a decision. Who do I want to be and how do I want to be? Like, and this was before I found out that I was adopted. I was asking these questions. But then when I found out the different parallels, I had to pick and choose which parts of those I wanted to continue to embrace. And I made a decision. I did not want to embrace my father's temper, because my father is actually in a Connecticut state prison for murder. There you have it. I have in my DNA, I have a parent who is a murderer, and he is in prison for life. And that was a hard pill to swallow, because I felt like I had this image to uphold. Like, I can't say that I have a parent who's in prison, but his decisions don't define me, doesn't make me who I am. He was just a part of the process of getting me here. So anybody else has any other questions? This has been great. I'm so glad that people are on in this, because the whole purpose of me doing the adoption series on my podcast, as I stated, was because I wanted people to kind of have some liberty. Tracy said that comes from growing up around us. Shoot, do us wrong, we coming for you. Oh my God, when I think about y'all, when I tell y'all, salvation is just not a word. It is something that actually happens. Because even being the child of a pastor, I was still trying to cut a fool. And I just look back over my life. Like that song, I look back over my life, woo, and I think things over. Yes, I'm blessed. But I don't take anything away from this journey. I don't take anything away from my parents contributing, birth and adopted, contributing to who I am, because ultimately, it's up to me to decide who and how I become. And so this video is made public, so if you want to share it. And then again, I have a podcast. You can sing it with me, Shawanda. Look, y'all need to go, and there's this person on here, Shawanda Lynette. Go and check her page. That girl is a songbird, and I think she has Shawanda, put in the link about the place where you're doing the singing. There's a new thing you said Sharia showed you, and I think you're doing the videos. I can't remember. I thought it began with a V. But most Black people don't listen to podcasts, but I'm going to try to change that. I don't know why, but I do know why, because I didn't listen to podcasts until like a couple of years ago. But I do have a podcast, and you can listen to it on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Castbox FM. If you download a podcast app on your phone, it'll lead you somewhere, and you can find me there. I'm on iHeart, Spotify, and soon to be on Pandora. And the name of the podcast is The Life Diet 365. And so I have an episode. Yeah, put it in the link. Put it in the comments. Because I believe in what you're doing. Like, girl, you're an amazing voice. And it's a sultry, healing, and soothing voice. And, who knows who might need to hear that. So it's The Life Diet 365. And the podcast is really based off of my book that I wrote, The Life Diet 365, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of You. And it's about the perspective of life. And then I paused to do this adoption piece. So it's going to be an episode releasing this weekend, and then another one will be releasing on Tuesday. So it'll be 2 episodes. So if you haven't had a chance to check out the podcast, So Shawanda is an app called Voicey. And she also has music on all digital outlets, and her name is Shawanda Lynette. I definitely encourage you to check her out. Please, please, please check her out. You're welcome. Like, I believe in you. Life Diet 365 podcast. And so there's like 7 episodes up there right now. And I really just talk about life and perspective. And I always close my podcast by saying, I'm not here to change your mind. I just want to offer you another perspective. So I'm not here to change your mind about adoption, about an adopted parent, or being an adoptee. I just want to like provide a nugget that will help you to, I said it in a video I did earlier, you know, it's like Kool-Aid, you know, and I didn't have Kool-Aid until I was 16 years old. My friend Tracy up here, her mother, and I went down to her house and had Kool-Aid, and I swear you think it was crack, because I always wanted to go to her house because my mother didn't serve stuff like, my mother made fresh juice. I'm like, I want the stuff that people down the street are drinking. See, now I done forgot my thought. Lord have mercy. But you know, I wanted to do this because I just felt like the conversation needed to be had. And you know, my book, The Life Diet 365, Life, Liberty, The Pursuit of You, is available on Amazon. I think it's only like $10. It's either $6 or $10. I'm not sure because I done changed it so much. And but I'm just talking about life, because I just think that sometimes we just need to have a conversation and just listen to someone else's perspective. Oh, I was talking about the Kool-Aid. So it's just like Kool-Aid. So you can open up a pack of cherry Kool-Aid and put it in, mix your water. And yes, you can drink it, and it's still Kool-Aid. But I consider my perspective like sugar. So when you put the sugar in, it's still Kool-Aid. It just tastes a little bit sweeter. So it didn't change the fact that it was Kool-Aid, just gave it a different taste. And that's what I feel that I offer in conversation through the Life Diet podcast. So definitely plug in, subscribe, because as soon as this whole COVID lockdown is over, I can actually get back into the podcast studio, and I plan to have guests on, because someone else who's actually on this podcast, she was actually a foster parent, and I want to be able to get her perspective, you know, on that. And then, you know, I have someone else, one of my coworkers, who actually considered adoption. And so I might kind of do a mixture so we can have other people talking. It's just not my voice. But I thank you guys for giving me 47 minutes of your time tonight, and I appreciate the dialogue. And still post questions in here, and I will come back and answer. And if there's something you want me to come on next Friday night and talk about, then I will definitely do so. But you say you would be like, y'all got Kool-Aid? Yes. I told you, I love that Kool-Aid. Oh, you're an adoptive parent. How old are your, Oasia, is that how you pronounce it? McDaniel, how old are your children? Oh, I love that. Because there's someone else on here who's watching, who's considering, Shawanda actually posted a question that she's thinking about adopting. And then I have a coworker that mentioned it to me, because I think it's a great thing. Now, are your kids, do they know their birth mother, McDaniel? Oh, this is great. But going back to Tracy, she said, you be like, y'all got Kool-Aid left? Like, I'd be down to try to get some Kool-Aid. Oh, 9 months old. Oh my God. So are you going to plan on telling her? And if so, at what age do you think you'll tell her? Oh, it's a he. What age do you think you'll tell him? Yeah, Tracy's mother used to make Kool-Aid. Like all the stuff that I couldn't get at my house, I would go down to their house. Oh, wow, you adopted him at birth. And that was the same with me. And when I found out, I think I was so appreciative that I was able to keep my original birthday. I really do. Like, that means a lot to me, that my adoptive parents didn't feel the need to change my birthday. So I was so appreciative of that. And so I think it's a great thing. Hats off to you, you know, for adopting. And I pray that, you know, everything that you need, you know, for this child's life is fulfilled, and every question that he asks, you'll be able to answer 99% of them, because we can't answer all questions. We just don't know everything, but you'll be able to answer, and then he will be at peace with it. And so for Shawanda, you know, whatever your desire is, I pray that that happens for you, because here's the thing. if you're a person and you have a lot of love to give and you have something to offer, why not share that with another person? Why not share it with another person? I'm grateful for what I was given. I think even the fact that I grew up a PK, that it gives me a different perspective on what I expect from a spiritual experience. And not only was I PK, I was Holiness Pentecostal. No, it was Kojic. Yeah, it was Kojic. I ain't gonna talk about that. So if no one has any other questions, like, I thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to share the video. And like I said, you can continue to post questions in this and I will ask, and depends on the dialogue that I get from here, and then I get text messages and messenger stuff. I'll come back on and talk again about the episode that's going to drop this weekend. I want to tell him about the adoption as soon as he starts talking. Okay. Wow. That is great. That is great. Because I think there's a lot to that, because I think it's a fair shot. It gives everybody right there on an even playing field to ask questions and even deal with his emotions at that time as he experiences them. To deal with the emotions as he experiences them. So that is so great, and I'm really excited, about sharing this story with my birth mother Regina, when she found out I was doing this podcast. Yeah, you missed it. It was good. It's worth the replay. Like, you just sit it down somewhere and let it play. That's what I do with long videos, because y'all know I don't usually do long videos. They're like 20 minutes and that's it. She said, "What is this I hear about you writing a book about something?" She said, most people who are not on social media, they don't understand. She said, "Yeah, I heard you were getting ready to talk about the adoption." And she said her husband had told her. And I was like, "Well, how did you find out? How did he find out? Because neither one of you are on social media." So I think my sister had told him about it. She was like, "Oh my God, that's great. I think you should do that. I think you should write a book." I started a book years ago. I just hadn't really finished it. So I just want to have this conversation. So that's what this is right now, conversation. And I think that I want to provide a platform for people to come and hear the answer to the questions that they didn't want to ask. Even if you ask me something in private, I'll come on and make a live about it so we could talk about it. So, hopefully you guys will, join me again. And like I said, hopefully you will plug into the Life Diet 365 podcast and tune in. And I just actually started this podcast just to kind of, build the following. I don't, it's not a whole lot of commenting back and forth, but, download. So I'm just trying to build a following. So if you would follow me and share it, that would be absolutely great. So thank you so much for joining. Shawanda did put her information in the comments. Thank you everyone for sharing. And I appreciate you watching, and enjoy the rest of your Friday. Bye-bye.